So despite all the drama going on and all the issues the game is having, today we're going to have a bit of fun and rank every single optic in the game. Now remember, this is quite an opinion based video, so if you disagree or want to put your own list in the comments, I will happily tell you that your opinion is wrong or not. Also, if you're a wee bit behind and want to learn a little bit more about the drama going on, I made a video on it I think about 3 days ago, so I'll link that in the description. So, starting at the bottom of the D tier is the 1 to 2 times scope. I would much rather run iron sights than this optic. Like, seriously, I'm not quite sure what it is about this optic, but for whatever reason, I cannot aim with it. In theory, this should be one of the best optics in the game, but the reticle looks so weird and it puts me off. And on top of that, the scope is so dummy thick and you can't really see that much around it. I suppose the only two guns that I would say is acceptable to run this optic on is the Spitfire and maybe the Hemlock. But if I ever see anyone unironically running the 1 to 2 on a wingman, I might actually be sick. The other optic that I've got in the D tier is the 1 times hollow. This sight is almost as bad as the 1 to 2. And it has the same problem with the reticle looking really weird and taking up just way too much on the screen for no reason. And the edges of this optic take up far too much of the screen, and it just can make it difficult for tracking sometimes. But same as the 1 to 2, I'd only accept this on the Hemlock or the Spitfire, and maybe, just maybe, certain SMGs. But if you put this optic on a wingman, I will sneak into your room, take out your eyeballs, and eat them for my breakfast. First up in the C tier, I've got the 6x sniper optic. Most of the time I've got this on a sniper is because I'm using a sniper against my will, because my options are either a Sentinel with a 6x or a P20. The 6x doesn't really have a place in the game, to be honest. 6x seems to be perfectly in the middle, where it zooms too far to be usable in close to mid-range, and not zoomed in enough to be effective in long range. The scope also has the same issue as the 1 to 2 and the 1 times hollow, where the sides of the scope just take up a little bit too much space and you can't really see much around your main target. So I can only accept this scope on your gun because I know it's all you can find and you will swap it out immediately once you find a better one. Next in C tier is the 4 to 10 times thermal scope. Now this is definitely the cleanest of all the sniper optics. However, the reason I put it into the C tier is because of how big of a jump going from 4 times to 10 times is. 4 times feels great because it's just close enough to be able to be used in close range, but it's still quite effective in mid and long too. But the 10 times just feels like I'm trying to zoom into somebody's soul. It's just too much zoom, unless you're trying to hit someone really far away. So I know this one doesn't really count, but I wanted to give it an honourable mention to keep the Kraber optic, since it's the only gun in the game with this optic. It's basically if you took a 6 times optic and allowed it to zoom up to 10 times. So pretty much if I took all the issues with the 6x optic and allowed me to see the enemy's internal organs. So it's a C tier. Right, so B tier. I've only put one optic, technically, and that's the 4 to 8 times sniper optic. This is, in my opinion, the best sniper optic in the game. Although it is quite similar to the 6x, I think the visibility on it is a bit better. 4 times is definitely the sweet spot when it comes to sniper optics for close to mid-range. This is technically the only optic in the game that allows you to zoom to 8 times, which I think is also the sweet spot for shooting long ranges. But if I forget to unzoom my optic to shoot at someone in mid-range, it's not so close that I'm trying to inspect my enemy's individual hair follicles. So I'm giving an honorable mention to Vantage's ultimate scope, because it is technically a scope, right? And today was the first time I had ever selected Vantage as my legend, and honestly, she's pretty neat and I quite like playing her. Her scope also kinda surprised me as it's a 3 times to 8 times optic. Her visibility in the optic is pretty good compared to the 6 times and the 4 times, which is nice because I can actually see things around my main target. 3 times is also 100% usable in close range if you want to quickly take out your ult and snap a shot as some quick entry damage. And when it's zoomed in, it's an 8 times, which I've already stated I like for long to mid ranges. Overall, I would say this is actually my favourite optic for snipers, and would actually love if this was to become a real usable optic in the game. So top of B tier it is. Right. Moving on to the usable optics in this game with the A tier. And first up is the 2 to 4 times. I absolutely love this optic on certain guns, so the Hemlock, the Nemesis, and I love this optic on the flatline. Jitter aiming a flatline on a 4 times feels amazing. The only issues I have this is optic is it's not really usable on a lot of guns, but on a certain few, it's really good. As well, the visibility isn't great either, which I think I've made pretty clear I dislike, and I sometimes find myself struggling to track with it in close ranges. But overall, it's a fantastic optic that I use pretty often. It's just overthrown by a select few optics, so A tier. Next in the A tier is the 3 times optic. Now this is a very good optic. It has great visibility, a nice reticle that doesn't take up too much of the screen, and it can be used on most guns. Unlike the 2 to 4, this optic is much more usable on a more wide variety of guns, like the R31, the L-Star, and the Havoc, which is nice. This optic also has the top of it cut off, which I absolutely love on optics in games, because it just gives it so much more visibility and I can track things in all ranges far better. There really only is one issue with this one, and it's that it can be a tad clunky to use in close ranges sometimes, since it is a 3x scope, and sometimes that can just be a wee bit too much. Overall, great optic and I use it all the time. A tier. So lastly in A tier is a favorite of mine and probably every other Apex player, and that is the 1 times optic. Very few bad things about this optic at all. The visibility on this gun is among the best in the game, with the top of it being cut off, which I just said was a great plus to it. The side of this optic are nice and skinny too, which makes it so much easier to track in all ranges because I can see where my enemies are coming from and where they're going. The reticle is probably my favorite in the game, with it being just a simple dot in the center of my screen, and honestly, that's all I can ask for in an optic. The amount of optics in this game that could be so much better if the reticle was just a dot instead of some insane nonsense all over the middle of my screen. It's also usable on pretty much any gun in the game, from ARs to pistols to shotguns. It works on everything, so top of A tier for sure. So now we have the S tier, which I've only put one optic in, and it's the 2x Bruiser. This is by far the best optic in the game. Its visibility is probably the best in the game, with the top part of it being cut off and the edges being nice and skinny. The reticle is small and nice to track with and doesn't get in the way at all, and it's very unique because I think it's the only scope in the game that has a triangular shaped reticle, which I like. It has such a wide variety of guns to be used on, and pretty much most things that I would put, say, a 3 times or a 2 to 4 on, I would immediately swap out for a 2x. So S tier it is. Now, I've got a God tier. This has one optic in it, and that optic was so good that it was removed from the game entirely. It is the one and only 1 times digital threat. It's very rare for Respawn to just straight up remove something from the game, which just goes to show how much of a menace this optic was. Being able to see through smoke and other visual clutter was just far too strong. I mean, imagine being able to shoot directly at your target without even being able to see them. But besides that, I also really liked using this optic in general. The reticle is super nice, although it does get in the way slightly, but I don't notice it nearly as much as on something like the 1 times Holo. Tracking was also super easy with the scope for whatever reason, so no wonder it was removed from the game. And there we have it. That is my opinion on the optics in Apex Legends. You know, some are good, some are bad, but let me know in the comments if you agree with me, and if you don't, you're wrong. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you later.